This podcast is made possible by Avalara and Ledge.
Hi, it's Jamie Mock, CFO of Moderna, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader podcast.
This is episode 1003.
If you know how your value chain economics are set up, and you have fairness on both sides of the equation within a system. So in that context, it was Coca-Cola selling concentrate, the bottlers buying the concentrate and selling it on. Having a balanced set of economics where both parties are incentivized and both can reasonably predict what they're going to get in terms of revenue and profit. That's good for a business. It's good for investment.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Robert Cornella, CFO of Republic National Distributing Company, RNDC. Robert Cornella's path to the CFO office at RNDC wasn't meticulously planned. Instead, it unfolded organically, guided by pivotal moments and unexpected opportunities. One such moment arrived with his appointment as CFO of Coca-Cola Germany. It was as if I was handed the keys to the kingdom, Cornella recalls. Still, Cornella had some nagging doubts. He wondered whether he was truly ready. But others, with more experience, said he was, allowing him to accept the position and rise to the occasion. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? Aren't the expectations of others what have so often exposed your future path? You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. Our talk with Robert Cornella begins after this. You know the feeling. A report deadline is looming, and your team is buried in spreadsheets with tasks like bank and payment processor reconciliations, journal entry prep, and cash flow reporting. But what if there was a better way? Ledge automates the tedious work that slows your team down, like high-volume transaction matching, journal entry creation, and even cash flow forecasting. Ledge glues all of your financial data together across your ERP, banks, payment processors, data warehouse, and more, and automates any workflow, no matter how complex or unique to your business. Get real-time cash flow visibility and make cash reporting and forecasting effortless while increasing controls and accuracy. And Ledge requires no IT or R&D resources. Ledge plugs right into your existing stack, so you can get set up in just a few hours. Imagine a world where your team can close the books faster with fewer resources. Imagine audit-ready data all year round. With Ledge, you can finally stop scaling headcount just to keep up with growth. Visit ledge.co. That's ledge.co to learn more about how you can automate your finance operations without the heavy lift. Hello, we're speaking with Robert Cornella, CFO of Republic National Distributing Company, RNDC. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Great to be here. Thank you.
So, as always, we're going to ask you to look back, Robert, and what we're interested in are those experiences you feel best prepared you for the role. As you look back, what comes to mind?
There's probably three experiences, Jack, I think that prepared me for this role, and they go back to my early career. The first one would be when I started with Ernst & Young in corporate finance as a young man out of graduate school as a staff consultant. This in those days, you go back 20-ish years, it was very fast paced. It was competitive. We were working literally, it seems like 24/7 back in those days just to get ahead. And it was a great formative experience for me. I got to roll up my sleeves and work with a lot of CFOs of mid and large size companies, both public and private. And it was a great, fast-paced learning experience for just a young man out of graduate school. And a funny anecdote about that, I was reflecting back on this recently, is if you work some insane amount of hours back in those days, you would get something like $1,000 bonus at the end of the year, which meant you effectively to get the $1,000, you'd have to work nights and weekends. So I always kept a shaving kit and a change of clothes at the office back in those days because there'd be numerous all-nighters. So great experience at Ernst & Young. And then my second formative experience would be when I joined Coca-Cola and I started in their M&A group. So Coke had an internal mergers and acquisitions team. I had just gotten back from Switzerland at the time, and I took the job at Coca-Cola. And then I was immediately put in charge of consolidating our German and our Northern European bottling operations for Coca-Cola, which was quite a strategic initiative of theirs at the time. So I basically moved myself over to Europe. And that was a great experience, first because I got to learn manufacturing, distribution, logistics from the bottom up and embed myself with these bottlers as we were putting these multi-billion-dollar transactions together. And the second reason it was great is because it was such a high priority strategic initiative for Coca-Cola. I had the opportunity numerous times to present to the CEO and the CFO of Coke directly. So again, as a young M&A person new to the group, that was tremendous experience for me. And then last but not least, I would say recently, when I took the CFO job at Costa Coffee, and for your listeners that don't know what Costa is, because it's not very prevalent in the U.S., it's the world's second largest retail coffee chain after Starbucks. So it's very, very large, huge in Europe, UK, Asia. And I had taken that role right at the beginning of COVID, and I thought, I think we all thought the pandemic was going to be much shorter than it was. And it turned out, so I took the role in the US and everything had shut down. I couldn't get myself over to Europe. So here I was in the US being the CFO of this company that was based in Europe and Asia. And, obviously, just like many companies, our revenue dropped very quickly from all the store closures. And we had to do a significant restructuring and series of cost cuts. And never having the benefit of meeting the people nor step foot in the operations, I had to do all of that over Teams. And it was a very, very challenging time and very transformative for me. And what I learned from that is it was a bit of an unsettling experience, but sometimes you have to act quick, act on your intuition, and you can always course correct later, but you can't try to get perfection at the cost of not acting, when you're faced with a series of challenges in a CFO role.
Wow. Really nice overview for us, Robert. Thank you for that. I feel like I have a lot of doors I want to turn the knobs on and ask you about. But going back, and it looks like your career is about 25 years roughly in length. How much of that time did you spend abroad?
I would say, Jack, it was probably a good solid almost 80% of it. It was almost 20 years.
Yeah, and I think it began way back during your Ernst & Young chapter, which is what you really kicked off professional life with. Is that right? How did that happen exactly?
It's a great question. It's interesting because I had, when I was in graduate school, I had done graduate school partly in France. So I did part of my MBA over in France. So I learned French, and I come from my family background is Northern Italian. My father's family came over to New York from Northern Italy. So I always had this kind of European bent to me. And when Ernst & Young needed someone to go to Switzerland and help start their mid-market corporate finance practice at the time, I had a lot of experience in Europe. I was one of the few in the Atlanta office that did. So they said, Rob, would you like to go over and help, go on a 2-year assignment, help start the office in Switzerland? I thought, wonderful, great idea. I didn't really have any ties back here. So picked up, moved to Switzerland, and had a wonderful 2-year experience there.
But when you changed jobs and you joined Coca-Cola, you joined them in Europe. Is that right? How did that happen exactly?
Interesting story. The short of the long of that, I came back to the United States after the 2 years to Ernst & Young, landed back in Atlanta, and then somehow not too long thereafter, Coca-Cola called me. I was back here, and they said, we have an opportunity in our M&A group. Not too many people, had at that point in that time come from the outside, into Coca-Cola to M&A, interviewed for the role, got the role. And I'll never forget, I was supposed to start on a Monday, And they called me in on Friday. They said, don't bother coming to the office Monday. Here's a computer and here's a set of plane tickets. Go on a plane to Copenhagen and just show up at this office and they'll tell you what to do. Hence, that began my international career with Coke.
Already, you have a defining sort of role there. M&A is really where you have a lot of accomplishment in the early part of your career, and then it opens doors for you as you go forward. Is that a simplification, or how would you?
Well, no, I absolutely think it does. I think M&A is a great piece of experience for anyone, any finance leader to have at some point in their career. And I was just very fortunate to have had it, both at Ernst & Young and then when I moved to Coca-Cola. And, when you operating with a company like Coca-Cola at that level of scale and the money that's involved, because you're doing not sort of 10 million, tens of millions or hundreds of millions, you're doing billion-dollar transactions. So Coke's M&A group was very fast-paced. It was kind of the internal investment banking group, and that was just a tremendous opportunity for me. I learned quite a bit about just how complex tax operations around the world works, supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, distribution, you name it. It was just a great opportunity when I was young to roll up my sleeves and learn the whole CPG industry.
I think it's interesting. You mentioned how your education, you brought it to Europe, and that sort of prepared you for this career that you've been having. I'm looking at the different degrees and different times. You've got certificates from a variety of different colleges, and I believe you got a master's from Oxford.
I did.
How do you look at education? I think you might look at it differently than most of us, perhaps.
That's a great question. And I think it goes back to my family. If I have to kind of nail it to one thing, having my father's family came over from Northern Italy to the U.S. So education and learning and diligence and hard work were a part of kind of the ethos I grew up with. And so education was always just a way to better yourself in the United States, which is the wonderful thing about this country. And I was also given I had the opportunity to travel. My father took us back to Europe when we were young teenagers. So that exposed me to the European element of how life is different somewhere else. And I was also very academically focused myself. And, it's certainly, everyone's different, but for me, I excelled in academics. So combining the overseas education and experience with the academics, I think was a core part of my career trajectory to where I am today.
Have you ever taught, or do you think one day maybe I'll teach?
I've thought about it. Kind of what's the next gig, many years from now. And I have thought about that. So I think you hit a nail on the head.
All right. So tell us about something about Coca-Cola. I mean, I have to be honest, we've had quite a few Pepsi veterans on, and they're all very proud of their Pepsi roots and what have you. But not so many Coca-Cola. And I don't know if you have a point of comparison you might share for us as you compare notes to peers, not necessarily your Pepsi peers, but other people in other finance organizations. What set Coke apart, do you think? Any one thing, or such a well-known brand, clearly, that I would think
Absolutely.
People want to talk to you. Yeah,
They do. And I think people are fascinated about the magic and what's behind the curtain at Coca-Cola, the secret formula, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think it has, some of the absolute best marketing in the world. I mean, that's what Coke is known for. And, having this tremendous brand that has stood the test of time for 125 plus years. The interesting thing, Jack, again, this is my view of Coca-Cola finance when I was there, was finance was always a very tight-knit community within Coca-Cola. And if you look at Coke now, and you look at the past leaders of Coke, many of them came up through the finance function, actually. So it was a breeding ground of talent. And the finance folks at Coca-Cola that I work with, they were not only great finance and numbers people, they were just great business people. And so finance was a feeding ground to many, many opportunities, across the globe at Coke. And they would always, as we used to like to say, if the CEO or a general manager or president of a BU ever stepped away for a bit, it was always the CFO that was anointed the person in command. So Coke has a very rigorous and disciplined finance structure. They have great talent. They're led by great people. So I do think that's what sets Coke apart from from many of the other CPG companies that you may see out there.
I just want to share with the listening audience. It sounds like a fairly traditional path at Coke, where, again, you mentioned M&A. Of course, you came in as a senior corporate mergers and acquisition manager, but you step into a number of finance director roles going forward, both in Europe and larger geographies. And eventually you become CFO of the global technical and supply chain. Is that right? Is that
correct?
So yep. A unit. And can you tell us something about those steps that you took? Which one of them, I guess, was the one where you had the most to learn? Where did you? And I'm sure you pushed yourself in each of them. But like I said, you're in that M&A corridor. You have a lot of comfort there, but you're taking on other challenges as you go up at Coke, it appears.
Great question, Jack. Everything at Coke and everything I've done was always, I looked at it as a learning opportunity. And I was fortunate enough to probably get put into jobs that I myself didn't quite feel ready for, but maybe others that were wiser than me did. And they knew it would be a stretch. So when I think about it, as I pivoted from M&A and having known Europe and the bottling system and manufacturing so well, there was my first CFO role was CFO of Germany. And I had just come off the back of consolidating all these bottlers and manufacturers that Coca-Cola had brought up and, brought together into one in a multi-billion-dollar transaction. And then I was handed the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, to actually run, Germany as the CFO. And that was not within my radar at the time. But again, wiser people thought, I would be well positioned for it. And I think in retrospect, they were right, because I knew so much about that. I knew the bottlers. I could speak German by that point. So that was a pivotal moment for me, just to, run the operations that I had helped to build, along with some, many other great people within the Coca-Cola German system at that time. And then, I had planned to go to another business unit after Germany. I wanted to go to either London or Spain, because that was kind of the path. You do your time in Berlin and go to another cool place. And at the time, it was either Madrid or London. But then they had come to me and said, look, we're trying to formalize our finance function more for our, what I would say what's the industrial back of the house function at Coca-Cola that not many people know about, which is the concentrate operations, which is what makes over 70% of the revenue. Yeah. So we were starting first in EMEA. We called it commercial product supply. So that's manufacturing, it's sales, it's the commercial tactics of selling concentrate to the franchise bottlers. It's a very big operation, multi-billion dollars in EMEA. And so they asked me to go to Ireland and start a finance team for EMEA. And that was not within my radar again at the time. But they said, Rob, if you go learn supply chain and you learn all the kind of the mechanics of what goes on behind, excuse me, this is going to be great experience for you in your career. And they were absolutely right. At the time, I thought my trajectory was going somewhere, and then it pivoted there, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me, Jack.
Great example for us. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, when you do leave Coke, you step into the world of Costa Coffee, and again, an international experience. And we're coming up to, of course, where you are, RNDC today. Are you finally based in the States, and are your responsibilities global, or are you traveling to Europe these days? Not so much.
I am still traveling to Europe for personal kind of fun reasons. But I am now fully, for the first time in my career, based in the U.S., not going anywhere. In Atlanta is where the home base is. We have offices in 40 different states, but Atlanta is the home base. So I am definitely here, embedded, and planted roots now again.
Robert, we might have a few more career-related questions. I know we're going to. Which we'll ask a little later on. Right now, let's find out about RNDC. It has a long history, and I know that is it the second largest distributor of wine and spirits across the U.S.? Is that right? Yep.
We are.
With that in mind, tell us more. Tell us some more about RNDC. What's it up to today? Why was this the right time? And you joined in 2022, I should point out, as CFO.
So a little bit about RNDC. We're one of the nation's leading wholesale beverage alcohol distributors. We're actually number 2 in the U.S. We specialize in wine and spirits. We operate in 40 states plus the District of Columbia. I think what certainly sets RNDC apart from its competitors is our excellence in execution in the market. That's what we are known for. We strive to bring the best to all of our supplier partners and our retail partners. So, we're known for doing what we say we're going to do and executing. And we want to be the most valuable partner to all of our suppliers and the retailers within the value chain of alcohol distribution in the United States. And then last but not least, I do want to mention we are a family-owned company. We're private. We invest for the long term here, and we pride ourselves on having a very strong set of core values, which includes honesty, professionalism, accountability, and doing the right thing. So that's certainly what sets us apart, we believe, from our peers, and our supplier partners recognize that as well. So
roughly 10,000 employees, or is it larger? Or
we have about a little north of 13,000 employees now.
Well, and has the company ever been public? I mean, it has a long history. So
great question. A lot of people ask that. We've never been public. And our history goes back. If you really go back to the kernels or the nuggets or the genesis of one of our predecessor firms, which was Young's Market Holdings in California, we're over 100 years old. So we're very proud of that history. But certainly this industry in the distribution tier, for those of your listeners that don't know, once Prohibition ended, it was enshrined in the 21st Amendment, basically to have a 3-tier system: the supplier, the distributor, and then the retailer. So we're in the distribution tier, in the middle tier.
Interesting. Is M&A part of the mix for growth, or is it organic, or what are you thinking? Yeah.
We have done quite a bit of M&A in the last several years. And I would say where we are now with interest rates, it's let's digest what we have, make it work efficiently, let's harvest the benefits of scale. But we're always doing bolt-on acquisitions. We acquire smaller distributors in certain states or in certain categories. So we're always looking on the lookout for M&A opportunities. But some of the bigger acquisitions we've done in the past several years. So I think good CFO always has their eyes open for opportunities. So we continue to scan the landscape, I would say.
Some of us might mistakenly not think of this industry as the most innovative, or it's where you go looking for innovation. When you think of innovation within this industry, what does it mean to you?
We are, at the end of the day, we are a value distributor to our supplier partners to get their product into the hands of consumers. So within that chain of value, what we look at in terms of innovation is, how do we make it easier for our supplier partners and our retail partners to do business with us in terms of systems, processes, ordering? Where we have it along those lines, where we have a lot of focus now, Jack, is how do we get better at suggested selling technologies? So we'll maybe talk about AI and artificial intelligence, but suggested selling algorithms. You look at we look at machine learning for our logistics and our supply chain operations. Systems that learn, the more data points they have, the smarter they get in terms of optimizing route delivery and order quantities. And then on the finance side, on shared services, what we spend a lot of time on is robotic process automation. I am personally interested in a lot of this generative AI and how can we make finance better and more efficient with AI. I think it's still in its nascent stages right now. We haven't found the holy grail, and I think many other companies haven't either. But it's certainly something that we're looking at as a company to innovate what we do and become more efficient.
What is it that when you arrived, we always like to ask about your lines of sight, and we're wondering if there is a metric or a number that you wanted to give a higher profile to across the organization, or maybe it was just a part of the organization, or maybe there was a measurement that was lost, just wasn't being perhaps calculated correctly. Is there anything you could share with us in terms of a metric that you've allowed the organization to study more closely, use in a different fashion? I don't know. Anything related to metrics that you can share with us?
I can. And first, I love metrics. I love KPIs. I love metrics. Any good finance person does. And as it relates to your question, it's a great question. We didn't have, when I came, we had a very sort of decentralized finance function. We didn't have any formal long-range plans. We didn't have a formal budget, and when I came in, coming from the background that I did, a core part of what I wanted to build here was more of an FP&A center of excellence. And as I always say, you need to know what good looks like, and you don't know what good looks like until you have good metrics and KPIs. Are we operating as efficiently as we can based on benchmarks? Are we getting our, fair share of the value chain? Are we operating at a reasonable, EBITDA margin? So what I've tried to instill, and I've had a lot of great people help me over the last few years that I've been here, is getting a more formalized FP&A team together, a long-range planning process. We're putting more finance resources in the field to drive execution and business partnering and business acumen within the states and the regions. And of course, all of that, the output of that are a rigorous set of KPIs and metrics that we track on a weekly and monthly basis.
There's so many steps that need to be taken for what you just described, all of, raising it to an FP&A center of excellence. How do we get to the mountaintop here with this talent and the skill sets that we have? Can you tell us any of the how you're doing on that journey? And did it begin with a couple of hires? Did it begin with just reallocating talent, or what path how did the path begin? Yeah.
All of the above. All of the above. It was a bit of a clean slate, a whiteboard, if you will. We have great people here at RNDC and finance. So part of it was reallocating some of the talent that we had internally to different roles, and then some of it was bringing in outside talent for a fresh perspective. Particularly folks that had worked for suppliers before in the industry that brought a different set of eyes, outside of, let's say, distribution. How do we think more like a supplier, or how does a retailer think? And then on the so we put some more finance business partnering in the field. So we're still building that, and that's been very successful thus far. And on the FP&A side, long range planning was a really key opportunity for us. It was an open opportunity. And so we stood up an FP&A team. We built it slowly but surely over the last 18 to 24 months. We digitized a lot of what we do. We've taken it out of sending around the paper, if you will, an email and PowerPoint decks, and we have a finance digitization initiative ongoing. So we now have dashboards. So it makes it easier for people to look at their performance, to see how they're tracking weekly and monthly. And that's still a work in process. We're not done. We're still on that journey. But have some good starts right now.
Have you, and again with the dashboard, and I ask the question this way because sometimes the finance leader has something to share. Sometimes it really hasn't changed that much. But I'm curious, as you originally might have envisioned that dashboard, we'll have this set of numbers up here, this metric over here. I mean, has the mix changed? Have you realized your original thinking? We'll have to do this differently. And I guess I'm thinking of like your management dashboard, the one with senior leadership or what have you. And maybe there are others, I don't know. But your philosophy when it comes to dashboards, less is more?
You hit that nail again on the head. I do believe less is more. And here's why I'll tell you why. We had so many different spreadsheets flying around RNDC at the time that the finance team was producing. And we were just creating reams and reams of data, but we weren't getting the key insights from the data. And so what I did when I came in along, with my team was figure out, okay, what do we do that's actually, highly value added that people look at? How do we get that into the dashboard? And then I think a common mistake many of us make in our career at some point is, you want to get everything in there. You want to have 20, 25 different metrics, and everyone everyone's got a point of view on what to measure. And that's important to get the feedback and the collective view on it. But if you really kind of boil this down into this, I'm a big believer in 3 to 5 top things to go after. And so I'm a big believer in 3 to 5 kind of key metrics for finance. So we look at profit, we look at gross profit margin, we look at operating expense, EBITDA margins, and other efficiency ratios. So I can get this down to maybe my tier 1 is maybe 5 metrics, my tier 2 is another 3 to 5. And so the less is more approach drives more focus in my view. And it's been able to kind of help us develop a common parlance around what does good look like at RNDC for finance.
So you mentioned you have a personal interest in generative AI, and the organization, however, has been actively using, I think, machine learning and some AI in different fashions related to sales development, and give you the visionary cap again. Look into the future for us 3 years. Are there things you're going to be capable of doing for your customers that you just wouldn't have thought possible just a few years ago? Or how would you characterize it? Kind of putting that out there. Probably not that ambitious, Jack. But
well, the first thing I'll say, Jack, is we are not as far ahead as let's say a tech company or a brand name CPG on the AI journey by any means. We're I think they were starting it years ago. We're getting into it just now, looking at what's out there. But what I will say is, if you look at where this is going and what AI aims to do, it aims to help you make better decisions by serving up a sort of a plate of options, or help pushing you in the right direction. So as I think about distribution, sales, this industry, finance, what I would love to see us do, and we are embarking on this journey already. Depending on we're at different phases, depending on the piece of the organization you look at. But if you look at sales, suggested selling, I think is one of the opportunities we have for anyone in this industry. How do you get better when you go into an outlet and talk about what is trending right now? What are your consumers buying? What is on the mind of the shopper? In terms of pack sizes, categories, products. Getting a few steps ahead of that with AI, I think would be outstanding for sales in our industry, and we're looking at several technologies. I think on the finance side, or kind of how we do efficiencies and back office operations, a lot of people talk about a lights out concept. A lot of what we do still is very manual here at RNDC, and as well as in the industry in general. So the things I'm looking at is how do we automate the touch points and make it easier for folks to do business with either AI or kind of process automation. And I think for the finance function, and I speak to other finance leaders, in the industry and outside the industry, that's what they're looking at as well. So that's where I see the power of AI and then generative AI going, within our space.
And you indicated several times that, we're not tech. This isn't Silicon Valley. But what I'm curious about is there any fear that you're going to be, given the systems that you have and the way you've adopted technology traditionally, you're at risk of not stepping up and leveraging it the way you should? And how accessible will these types of technologies be for this family-owned company, rich traditions, where the technology isn't necessarily cutting edge?
Sure. It's a great question. It's a great question. What I would say is, I'm the way I think about it, Jack, at this moment in time, at least, is what is the accessible AI that we have access to? What's accessible for a company like ours? And we're not, like you said, we're not a tech company, so we're not going to be changing the world with some new AI model or or technology. We utilize technology to make our business more efficient and better, right? For our associates and also to our supplier and retail partners. Let me give you an example. That's something we're working on right now, and I talk about accessible AI. One piece of accessible AI we have at this very moment in time is Microsoft Copilot. We use Microsoft. Copilot is an AI assistance tool where it takes a lot of data and a lot of presentations or things sitting on your hard drive or in your cloud, and it helps you summarize and make sense of it all. That is a technology that traditionally none of us had access to, but it's very accessible for any company. And I use Microsoft as an example. Google has amazing technologies, these large language models. So I think, are we going to be at the forefront of generative AI? No, we're not at this point in time. Are we going to use accessible AI to make our business more efficient and give our employees access to better decision making? Absolutely. And it all starts with an ERP journey as well. We're still integrating distributors that have different ERPs into one ERP. And so we're on that journey. And our view is, eventually we will consolidate, into one ERP for the company. And we're already on that journey. We're already starting to use tools that are out there. And if you really scratch, underneath the surface of generative AI or AI, there are some very accessible tools, not only for business, but also for us as just, consumers of data out there, on Google and these large language models you can put queries into. I've done it myself, on a personal level. So it's amazing what's out there, and most oftentimes for free, believe it or not.
Well, great. Thank you for that. That's exactly what I was looking for. And, yeah, of course, Copilot. And you're making a very valid point there. And that's what's happening in so many organizations. So anyway, this is me rambling on here. I'm just going to say, I think a lot of listeners will relate to that. That's where I think some innovation could happen in terms of all those employees who are out there experimenting with Copilot, discovering new ways to leverage it, use it, what it can and can't do well. As a leader, you get to sit in on conferences where people are sharing these types of ideas. All right, that's Jack. We're going to move to our finance strategic moment question, where we're going to just ask you to share a moment of insight that you've had along the way during your career. Again, we get all types of answers to this question. Some are career related. Others are just specific to a transaction. But when we ask you for a finance strategic moment, what would come to mind for you?
What comes to mind for me, and there are several, but if I had to pick one, it would be my experience as I was mentioning before, Jack, I was talking a little bit about when I got to Coca-Cola in Germany and I became the CFO. And when I became the CFO, I was a relatively young man at the time. It was my first CFO role. And I had to create a long-range plan now for this bottling entity, this manufacturing entity that had been put together, that I had helped kind of build through the M&A side of the business. My role at the time was M&A, leading that consolidation. And then all of a sudden I'm handed the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, to be the CFO. And I had to put together a long-range plan to say, what does this look like in 3 to 5 years? So you say to yourself, okay, well, how hard can that be? And what I had recognized then, sitting in this new role, was that we had so much work to do from an operational perspective to, harmonize our pricing, rebalance some of the value chain economics that were in place at the time, come up with a synergy plan to harvest the synergies and, drive the ROI at that time that the company had invested in these bottlers. So there were a lot more complexities to it than what I thought there would be at that moment in time. So there's a few key insights I learned from that process. It was first, and so we certainly did all the cleanup along with our bottling partners, our commercial teams. We cleaned up all the price terms and conditions. We can go to our retail partners and speak with one voice of the customer and get a common set of kind of commercial metrics and mechanics. We rebalanced some of the value chain economics to make sure that our franchise bottlers were incentivized to invest for the long term, and everyone was making a fair profit so they could invest capital. We really dug into the synergy plan. So put a lot of pieces in place to get the LRP done, presented to our senior management, because at the time that was a lot of money that Coca-Cola had invested. And certainly the board was looking at this very intently, as was Wall Street at the time. So we ultimately got that done, but there was a few things that I took away from that that I would say that I've used in my personal playbook over the years. Is first, I a relatively predictable revenue and profit stream is a good thing in the business. And if you know how your value chain economics are set up, and you have fairness on both sides of the equation within a system. So in that context, it was Coca-Cola selling concentrate, the bottlers buying the concentrate and selling it on. Having a balanced set of economics where both parties are incentivized and both can reasonably predict what they're going to get in terms of revenue and profit. That's good for a business. It's good for investment. Number one. Number two, when you come into a new role, as I did at that time, one of the first things I suggest doing is just understand where the top levers of value are. What drives the economics or the financial ecosystem of that business, and the system you operate in. So understand your value levers and which ones you have to pull. I would also say standardize, streamline, and scale as quickly as you can. Those are great opportunities for any kind of finance function. Understand when you're presenting to senior management, and at that time I had to go to the Coke CEO and CFO and other members of senior management and present this plan. You have to know what good looks like 3 to 5 years down the road. How do you define what good looks like? I think that was an important learning for me to help articulate that, to say, here's the vision, here's how we're going to get there, here's what good looks like. And then last but not least, make sure you surround yourself with the right people on your team that understand your vision, understand also what good looks like as you're building the team. So I was fortunate enough to be in that position. I learned a lot. There was a lot of trial and error on many things, but that helped me in subsequent roles, not only Coca-Cola, but outside of it and RNDC as well.
This episode is presented by Avalara. That's the sound of not worrying about sales tax compliance. Because when you automate it with Avalara, you don't have to worry about collecting sales tax or tracking who and what is tax exempt. With Avalara, you don't even have to worry about new tax laws and regulations. Avalara does it for you. If your business sells internationally, Avalara has you covered with cross-border tax compliance solutions. And when it comes time to file tax returns, Avalara automatically takes care of that too, giving you one less thing to worry about. Avalara has managed billions of sales for small, mid-size, and enterprise businesses, and seamlessly works with your current sales, e-commerce, and accounting platforms. Take the worry out of tax compliance with Avalara. Learn more at avalara.com. That's AVALARA.com.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round, where I'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We want you to think back to the change of roles. Now, at Coke, as you just relayed it to us, you stepped into this CFO role, which was really a unit role with a lot of responsibilities. But then you go on into the CFO role where it's just outside the wide body of Coca-Cola. It's an independent. You have stakeholders all around you, 360. What's the difference? Again, you had a heck of a lot of responsibility at Coke under those circumstances. But as you stepped into this new world, and I'm wondering, as you think back to the early days, your first 60 days at Costa or your first 60 days here, what is the piece of advice you would give yourself if you could go back in time? Hey, you know a lot, but here's what, I wish someone had told me,
You're right. You're right. The way I would answer that one, Jack, is at Coke, for example, you sort of know where the bounds within which you're playing. You know how this company operates. You don't have that much interaction with the board. Mainly senior leadership. It's a public company, and there's kind of a known operating model. So you know what people expect of you, and you know what kind of results are important in the metrics, et cetera. So when I stepped into the Costa role, and then also I'll talk about RNDC, Costa had a different set of stakeholders. It was still owned by Coca-Cola, but a completely separate entity that had been, effectively carved out of Whitbread at the time. So you have, different governments, different partners, you have an entire ecosystem of different stakeholders that you have to satisfy. And if I could go back in time to that role, I would say understand in the first 30, 60, 90 days, particularly 60 to 90, understand what your stakeholders want and what is important to them. Because it may be different. Certainly, it was different than operating in the normal Coca-Cola culture, for example. And then the same thing at RNDC. We're a private company. We're privately owned by a number of different families. It's important to understand what they want and what they value and what their ambitions and goals are. So that would be my advice. Don't presuppose certain things. Spend more time getting to know the board, the stakeholders, what they want, what they value. And it will make things a lot easier for anyone when you begin a new role.
Ultimately, is it a recruiter responsible for introducing you to RNDC, or is it a relationship, or how did it work exactly?
It was actually a recruiter.
They called. You stayed with Coke. They had called for years and years and years and years, and then finally you said, "Oh, sounds interesting."
It was right after COVID. The world had changed, and you say to yourself, "Okay, I'm still relatively young enough where I could have a whole second career," and it was the right opportunity, right place, right time. And I do have to say, I love beverages. I love this industry. I'm a wine aficionado. I'm a coffee aficionado, hence Costa. I love kind of sparkling waters and all the Coke products, the great Coke products that Coca-Cola sells. So this industry, beverages, kind of soft drinks, coffees, wines, spirits, it's something I love. And, I'm very fortunate to have found myself in this role because I just love what I do every day.
Well, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if there's something a lot of people don't know about you, something you've always done, something maybe you picked up along the way, something you do that sets you apart. Yeah.
Maybe two things that people don't know about me. I've been for the last 6 years, I've been a weekday vegetarian and weekend pescatarian. So I don't eat. I started getting into just, really, focusing on sort of what I would say healthy biohacking and cutting out meat and just trying to optimize my own kind of physical, mental, spiritual performance. Number one. And then number two, not many people know because I don't talk about it too much. I do want to own a small vineyard in Italy, in northern Italy at some point in my life. I don't know when, but it's on one of the bucket list items.
That's that everyone should have that. No,
yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Dedication does it take to have that type? Well, it takes discipline, but it also takes a lot of organizing and just to keep your food needs in the house or when you dine out or what have you. Are you going to tell me less than you would think, or after I figured out how to do it, it wasn't a big deal? And I'm just saying in terms of shopping and all of what it requires. Yeah.
But believe it or not, it's not as complicated as you would think because you can, in this day and age, you can go anywhere and get, either vegetarian options or fish, and if I'm out somewhere during the week, and there's no vegetarian option, I will have fish. So, and I will admit, on Christmas or Easter or New Year's special occasion, I don't mind meat. I'm just really focused on the health aspects of eating healthy and kind of macro eating and clean eating. And it's just, I think as we all get older, you just focus more on kind of optimizing your own performance and because it does take a lot. I think the one piece of advice I would give to anyone is, really focus. You have to always show up at your best and have a lot of energy. A lot of people look to you to kind of set the tone and the standard. And so what I've really tried to pay attention to is managing my energy levels and my performance so I can be there and be motivated and be energetic and, just kind of provide that level of performance that I expected myself and I feel the company expects of me.
What about a book selection or a resource of some kind, whether it's a podcast, anything you recommend to the audience?
I'm going to go a little finance kind of techno wonk here on that question, Jack. There is a book that I was given when I started Coca-Cola in the M&A group called Measuring and Managing the Value of Companies. And so that book is over 30 years old. It's in its 7th edition right now. But to me, that is a fantastic book for anyone in finance to understand what drives the value of a company, from an enterprise perspective. And, whether you're an M&A or just managing a company at the top level, CFO or CEO, it is a great book. So Measuring and Managing the Value of Companies would be my recommendation.
And you think you picked it up during your E&Y years, maybe? Did you way back then, or?
I believe it was right when I had moved over to Coca-Cola, and M&A was driving a lot of value. If you're a public company, what drives your public company stock price? And someone had given me that book when I started in M&A, if I'm not mistaken. And I tore through it. I just, consumed it within days. I loved it. And, that's me. Maybe some people wouldn't find that as interesting as I would. But it's a great book for business. Great book for business.
Well, Robert, we've enjoyed speaking with you. You've shared many insights all along the way, so thank you for that. And we are up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward for us. And we're interested in your priorities as a CFO of RNDC. What would those be?
3 simple ones, Jack. First is continue to evolve and digitize our finance function. Second one is continue to build better business and financial acumen in the field and be better business partners to our operators. And then thirdly, just allow these new structures that we've put in place to embed and start leveraging the value and the benefits of our scale. Those would be my 3.
Robert Cornella, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you, Jack.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. We hope 2024 is treating you well. If you haven't already, we hope you'll pay a visit to CFOthoughtleader.com and go ahead and subscribe to our Mentoring Round newsletter, where we highlight the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our recent CFO guests. Also, LinkedIn users, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.